I've lived in my neighborhood for many, many years. It's where my mom grew up and where we used to visit my grandparents all the time. My grandfather passed away when I was 30, but my grandma stayed in their house for another 10 years after that. When she passed away, I inherited the house, 15 years ago now. Even though both my grandparents are gone, the house and yard still hold so many memories for me. It helps me feel close to them, and I know my parents, aunts, and uncles love coming over for holidays because they have their own memories here too. At Christmas, I still put up some of the same ornaments on the tree that my grandparents used to hang. For Easter, I cook the ham and make cider for Thanksgiving using pots and pans that belong to them. It might seem silly to some people, but in my family, these are our traditions. The front yard has one of our favorite things in it, the big oak tree that my grandfather planted when he was just a child. His parents, my great-grandparents, were the original owners of the property. Then there's Karen. She moved in next door about a year ago and absolutely hates that oak tree. She complains constantly in the fall when the leaves start to drop. Never mind the fact that her kids love making leaf piles and jumping into them. Karen just sees the leaves as a nuisance. Last fall, she even started tossing the leaves back onto my lawn. But honestly, the leaves don't bother me at all. I leave them out all year long so animals can use them for shelter during the winter. Then in the spring, when I start mowing again, the leaves get mulched up and help fertilize the lawn. That might be one reason my lawn stays so green all summer. Karen's, not so much. I've given her suggestions before, like letting those leaves work for her instead of against her, especially since they come from both her trees and other neighbors. But she doesn't want to hear any of it. One Thanksgiving, I even baked her some treats, hoping it would help her feel more like part of the neighborhood. Maybe her complaining about the tree was just her way of trying to connect with someone? But it didn't work. Even in the winter, when the tree is bare, she'd bring it up whenever we met at the mailbox. One day I suggested, "Hey Karen, how about joining us for yoga at the recreation center this Saturday?" "I don't need yoga," she replied. "Well, what about the next crafting day then?" I offered. "You're one of the only people around here who never comes out to our events." "I have kids," she said. "I'm a single mom. I don't have time for silly stuff." "Taking time for yourself isn't silly," I told her. "And there are events you can bring your kids to too. Maybe it'd be a nice change of pace for your whole family." "You just don't want to talk about the tree," Karen interrupted. "That tree," she continued, "is the real problem. Not just the leaves, it blocks sunlight from coming into my house. It's a menace. You should get rid of it." "I'm not getting rid of my tree," I said firmly. "My grandfather planted it. It means the world to me and my family." "It's just a stupid tree," she snapped. "Well, maybe to you," I replied, "but not to me. Cut it down and plant some manageable shrubs instead. And stop being so selfish. The neighborhood isn't just about you." Her comment bothered me, but I knew arguing wouldn't do any good. She was clearly being unreasonable. I've always been pretty involved in the community, helping out at the local food bank, organizing neighborhood events, volunteering at church. To my knowledge, Karen hasn't even joined the parent organization at her kids' school. I couldn't figure out how to help her feel included without her focusing on petty things like fallen leaves. By early spring, when the buds started showing up on my tree, Karen came over and handed me a business card for a tree-cutting company. "I'm not cutting down my tree," I said. "How many times do I have to tell you this?" "The tree needs to come down," she insisted. "And since it infringes on my property, I should have a say in the matter." "There are some leaves that fall onto your side," I replied. "But the tree is clearly on my property, as it's been for over 80 years. It blocks my sunlight too," she added. "You're making life miserable for me and my kids." "Well, I think you're just unhappy in your life and looking for something or someone to blame." "I'm not giving in to that. That tree has been here longer than any of us, and it's staying." "Are you sure it's entirely on your property?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "I actually checked with the surveyor when you first started complaining after you moved in." I really missed my old neighbor Darren. She had lived next door almost the entire time I'd been in my house. She never caused any issues, but she decided to move closer to her kids and grandkids in retirement. I totally understood, but having Karen move in instead made things a lot harder. A few months ago, I flew to the Dominican Republic for a beach wedding. One of my cousins was getting married. We'd grown up together and were as close as sisters. I hadn't taken a real vacation in ages. I tend to be a bit of a workaholic, but this was one event I couldn't miss. I was excited for the trip, ready to soak in some sun and spend time with family. What I wasn't ready for was what I came home to. Driving up to my house, I was stunned. The tree was gone. Completely. No branches, no stump, just nothing. I knew it wasn't from a storm or tornado. I'd have heard about that, and I have weather alerts on my phone. Still, it didn't take me long to notice the danger tape around Karen's house either. Her roof looked like it had caved in. I immediately suspected the damage to her house, and the disappearance of my tree weren't coincidences. This wasn't a small tree, it was an oak over 80 years old. Something or someone had helped it vanish. What upset me most was that no one in the neighborhood had warned me. I could have used a heads up. Trying to keep my emotions in check, I headed straight to Karen's place, but seeing her house in that condition, I figured she probably wasn't staying there anymore. I asked around, and people told me she was staying at a shelter in the next town with her kids. So I drove over there and found her. "How about a walk?" I asked. "We need to talk, but not in front of your kids or everyone else here." "We certainly do," she agreed. Outside, I took a deep breath. "Now tell me exactly how my tree managed to wreck your house." "It fell on it," she said. "As tall and strong as the one my grandfather planted, but it feels good to see life growing again in that space." As for Karen, she's putting her house up for sale now. I'm hoping whoever moves in next door will become a friend, someone who respects the neighborhood and listens to reason. Life is hard enough without unnecessary drama and pettiness. Alright, so this is another one of those little petty revenge stories, and honestly, it might be one of my favorites. I call it, sit in my seat and refuse to move, enjoy being uncomfortable. Last week, I was flying back to London from Athens, where I'd been visiting family. It was a late flight, I was completely exhausted, and the plane was packed. I had chosen a window seat so I could lean against the wall and maybe catch a few minutes of sleep during the flight. But when I got to my row, there was already someone sitting in my seat. He had these huge headphones on and his head turned away from me like he wasn't even aware anyone was standing there. I told him, "Hey, that's my seat," but he didn't respond. Maybe he couldn't hear me over the music, I thought. So I gently tapped him on the shoulder. No reaction. Tried again. Still nothing. He wasn't asleep, he was sitting up straight with his eyes open, just pretending not to notice me. I considered calling over a flight attendant, but none were nearby, and honestly, I didn't feel like making a big scene. I was too tired for that kind of drama. So I just gave in and took the middle seat instead. A few minutes later, the woman who was supposed to be in the aisle seat showed up. She was traveling with her friend, who was sitting in the window seat in the row behind us. The two were chatting across the seats, and then she turned to me and asked if I'd mind swapping with her friend so they could sit together. I said, "Sure, no problem." Now, before I go further, I want to make something clear. Her friend was a larger woman. We're talking borderline obese. And I don't say that to shame anyone, I'm a heavier guy myself. But she was definitely taking up more than average space. I probably would have made the swap anyway, but as soon as I stood up, I saw an opportunity for a little bit of poetic justice. As I got up to move, I noticed the guy who had taken my seat had finally turned around and realized what was about to happen. His face dropped. He gave me this look like, "Please don't do this." But I just ignored him and slid into the window seat next to her. The rest of the flight? Absolute gold. I spent most of it with my eyes closed, trying and mostly failing to fall asleep. But every now and then, I'd peek over at the row in front of me, and let me tell you, it was so satisfying. The woman in front was spilling over into almost half of the window seat, leaving the guy who stole my seat smashed right up against the wall of the plane. I could only imagine how uncomfortable he must have been. I hoped he spent the whole flight thinking if I had just moved when she first asked, I could have swapped with the bigger passenger and gotten the aisle seat. Instead, he ended up squished like a sardine, stuck between a wall and someone who barely fit in one seat. And honestly, that tiny bit of karma felt pretty good. So yeah, if you've ever found yourself getting a little petty revenge on a plane, I want to hear your story. Because sometimes, those are the best opportunities to get a little bit of satisfaction in life. Alright, so here's another story I came across, and it's titled, A Thief Gets What He Deserves. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if this one counted as petty revenge or just, well, poetic justice. Either way, I thought it was worth sharing. Back when I worked at a large car dealership, everyone had assigned parking spots. The women usually got the first few rows since the lot could get pretty dark and spooky during winter months. That meant us guys were stuck with the back rows right up against the fence, far from the lights and the main building. Not a big deal to me, I didn't mind being out there. My spot ended up being in the very back corner, which honestly I was totally fine with. But every now and then, I'd show up to find someone had parked in my spot, which meant scrambling last minute to find somewhere else to park before work started. Turns out, the used car salesmen would sometimes hide cars they were trying to sell, especially ones they wanted to keep under wraps until their next shift. If they had a customer interested over the weekend, they didn't want the car sold out from under them by another salesman on Monday morning. And let me tell you, those guys would steal a sale from their own brother if it meant making a buck. So what do? They'd sneak those cars into employee parking. Then the person whose spot got stolen had to hunt for a new one, often at the last second. Sometimes, they'd just take someone else's assigned spot, and the whole thing turned into a domino effect. For some reason, though, they kept taking my spot, over and over again. The first couple of times, I went to HR and told them what was happening. They said they'd pass it along, but nothing ever changed. This kept happening 4 or 5 times a month, and I was getting really tired of it. Then came one particularly early Monday morning. I pull up, and sure enough, there's a used car parked right in my spot. I was already in a mood that day, so I did something about it. I grabbed the keys to the tow truck, hooked up the car, and hauled it all the way out to the service lot. I dropped it off in the area where our body shop kept cars waiting for parts, far away from where anyone would expect to find it. I put the tow truck away, parked my personal truck, a beat-up old Scout 75, in my spot and headed inside like nothing happened. A few hours later, one of the salesmen came looking for his car. After only finding my Scout in the spot, he started asking around who owned it. Eventually, he tracked me down. He wanted to know where his car was. I played dumb. Where was it parked? I asked. He hesitated. Right here, he said, pointing to my spot, which now had my truck in it. I shrugged. I don't know, man. This is employee parking. It shouldn't be here. Someone must have moved it. You should go talk to HR. And with that, I walked off. I assumed he found the car eventually because I didn't see him again after that. Well, guess what? The next Monday rolled around, and surprise, surprise, another car was parked in my spot. So I did the same thing. Towed it, only this time, I parked it across the street on another dealership's lot. I knew the manager there, and he said it was fine. Same result. A few hours later, another salesman came looking for his car. I gave him the same runaround, told him I didn't know anything, and sent him on his way. Eventually, HR, the used car manager, and the salesman showed up at my workstation asking about the missing car. We all went down to the lot together, and the salesman pointed to my spot, where my Scout was sitting. It was right here, he said. Yes, I replied, in my assigned spot. And now it's gone. They didn't have much to say to that. The used car manager was clearly getting annoyed, so I finally said, "Why are you mad? Your guys keep parking in my spot. I've been dealing with this for months." He grumbled, "I'll deal with that. Just tell me where the damn car is." I said, "Parked across the street at friendly dealership." What the hell? How did it get there? Well, I towed it. Let's just say things got a little tense after that. HR pulled me aside and said, "Please don't do that again. Come talk to me first." Fair enough. I figured that was the end of it for now. But the following Monday? Yep, you guessed it. Another car was in my spot. I had officially had enough. I drove my Scout up front and parked it on purpose right in the used car manager's designated spot, right outside his office. I made a point to park badly, half on the curb, with mud all over the place from the rainy weather we'd had. I even left clumps of dirt behind just to make it extra obvious. About 2 hours later, the manager shows up and I get paged over the intercom. "OP, please report to the used car manager's office." I figured this was going to be good. I walk in and he points to my truck. "That yours?" "Yeah." "Why is it parked there?" "Because even after last week's incident, your guys still parked in my spot." "Every time they do, I'm parking here." He tried to argue, but I stood my ground. "I can't move it. My spot's occupied. It's staying there until your car moves. And every day from now on, if there's a car in my spot, I'm parking here." He got angry. "Who the F **** do you think you're talking to? Move the car or I'll get it towed." I leaned in. "What's your problem? This is all your fault for not dealing with me like a real manager. You want to play games? Fine. Look at the rear bumper on my Scout. It's steel. Big, heavy. Next time I come in and your car's in my spot, I'm just backing straight in. If anything's in my way, I'll push it back." How does that sound? He didn't like that idea one bit. "You can't do that." I said, "You tell your people to stop hiding cars in my spot. Until then, my truck stays." I walked out. About 10 minutes later, I hear over the loudspeaker, "OP, please report to the general manager's office immediately." I walk in, and both the used car manager and HR are there. The UCM looks furious. HR looks like she's barely holding in laughter. The GM asks what's going on, and I explain everything. I talk to the salesman. I talk to HR. I talk to Commander Douchebag himself. And yet, they keep parking in my spot. So I started parking in his. He shakes his head and asks the UCM if this is true. Before the UCM can start ranting, the GM just holds up a hand and says, "Stop." Then he turns to HR and confirms what I said. Finally, he says, "Can you please move your car?" "I'll handle this." I agreed. Closed the door, and from 30 feet away, I could still hear the GM ripping the UCM a new one through the closed door. And honestly, that was the last time anyone ever parked in my spot.